So we're going to start this quiz preview with graphing, which we've done a lot of recently here. So I do want to go ahead, though, and get these two things situated because I'm going to need them for my graph. So my amplitude is that value in front of my sine or cosine, which also in turn will be the values that I use when I'm in my graphing, okay, for my y values. What's my period normally in a sine or cosine graph before I know b or anything? 2 pi. So remember, my period formula is to take 2 pi and divide it by b, whatever that happens to be, okay? And so when I'm looking at these, just a reminder, and I'm going to kind of put that over here to the side. When you're looking for your a and b values, the a values in front, we saw that already, their amplitude. B is not the period. B is the number of cycles. So if I don't see a number in front of my angle measure, okay, it's going to be 1. So since my period is just 1, 2 pi divided by 1 is just 2 pi. And if you put the over 1, that'd be okay. And so when I go to graph it now, we already put our maximum and minimum values in from our amplitude. Our period, remember, whatever we calculate our period to be, that's going to be our last line, because we're only going to graph one period. It varies. It's going to depend what our b value is, but we're going to see some of those as we go through these. So remember how we dealt with this before. We said, okay, what's in the middle is 0 and 2, because that's what's going to go in the middle here. Between 0 and 2 is 1. I can leave it as pi, or I could put it as 1 pi. This is the point where some of you start to waver a little bit. You're like, okay, well, what about here? There's 2 ways I can tackle it. If I know what's between 0 and this number, and again, I'm just looking at the coefficient. So if I know what's between 0 and 1, well, between 0 and 1 is a half. Okay, I can write that. If I'm not sure, we've talked about how we can do it on the calculator. You can take your 2 endpoints, not with the pi though. Whoops, I don't need 2 of those. Get my 0 plus 1, and then we just divide it by 2. We're finding the average, and we do that as a fraction. 1/2, 1 pi over 2. I got to remember to put the pi back though. And so when I get to my last line, I again have 2 choices. We've talked about how you can use a pattern. So I can say like, okay, this is 1/2, and I just keep adding 1/2 all the way through. 2 divided by 2 is 1 pi. 3 over 2. That doesn't reduce, so that would be my next line. And then 4 divided by 2 is 2. That works. Or if you're more comfortable, okay, sticking with the calculator, I could just do 1 plus 2, because those would be my endpoints if I was looking for this. Divide it by 2, math, enter, enter. And there's my 3 over 2. But again, got to have pi with all of these. And so that would have me ready to make my graph. One last thing to ponder. Let me move this back over. With cosine, am I going to start at 0 or am I going to start at the maximum? Okay, cosine starts at whatever my a value tells me. If this is 0.5, I start at 0.5. If this is -4, I start at -4. Sine starts at 0, cosine starts at the value. So maximum, 0, minimum, 0, maximum. Because remember, my cosine typically looks like a valley or a hill, like a U or a hill like that. Sine is the one that looks like an S shape. And that's it. Okay? Got my amplitude labeled, got my period labeled, graph to period. That's it. Okay, none of the big stuff like we were doing on the worksheet yesterday where we're stretching it way out. So for all of these graphing problems, there's going to be 4 of them. Everything on this preview, it's exactly what the quiz itself is going to look like. So I look at this one, I go, okay. Ooh, What's my amplitude on number 2? 2. Nicely done. You're like, but wait, it says -2. Remember, amplitude is always going to be a positive number. Okay? That -2 will come into play. We'll talk about that in a minute, but good job on that. Here, my B value is 4, because that's the number in front of my angle measure. So my period is 2 pi over 4. But if you can simplify it, you need to. And again, if you need to use the calculator to simplify it down, 1 over 2 or pi over 2, that's fine. Whatever you get for your period will be that last value when I'm going to graph. And now I go back into whichever method I'm going to use to get the numbers in the middle. So since this one's a little crazier with the fraction, we'll kind of stick with the calculator helping us some. So we're like, all right, let's see here. So it's going to be 0 plus a half. Got to remember to use parentheses when you've got fractions. Divide it by 2 because we're looking for the average. We're looking for the middle. And back into a fraction. 1/4 or pi over 4. Now here's the cool thing though. If you want to do it again right away, I don't have to go back and do 0 plus this. I can just divide it by 2 again, and that'll get me my first one. Now would it work to do 0 plus 1/4? Sure. And now again, my choices. Pattern, 1 over 8, 2 over 8, which is 1/4, 3 over 8, which doesn't reduce. You could try, but you'd find out it doesn't. And 4 over 8, which is 1/2. Or you could just do the 2 endpoints. 1/4 plus 1/2. Math, enter, enter. 3/4. Oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, I didn't divide by 2. Duh, Harty. See, look, even if I get going too quick, I can cause myself trouble. Divide by 2. Math, enter, enter. That's better. 3/8, okay? And so I could get it that way as well. I just got to remember to divide by 2. So sine always starts at 0. But here's where I've got to be careful. Most of the time, our sine graphs go 0, max, 0, and through there. But that -2 means it's going to be the opposite. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to go down, because my first value that I go besides 0 will always be this. So 0 minimum, 0 maximum, and we should always end back at 0. And I get my curve in. Sideways S, looks like a sine graph. That's a good thing. So that's what sine would look like. So I do have to pay attention to what the trig function is when I'm graphing these. All right, let's see what else we can get into here. Given y equals cosine of 3x, what's my amplitude on 3? 1, because there's no number in front of cosine. My b value is 3, which means my period is 2 pi divided by 3. And if I'm not sure, again, if that reduces, just do a quick math, enter on it. And it doesn't. So that's my period. This ought to be fun. So I'm like, all right. Oh. Now give yourself some credit here. You're like, I don't know if it's between 0 and 2/3. Think about it. 0 and 2, the middle is 1. And we just put the 3 back underneath. In between 0 and 2/3 is 1/3. You could still do it on the calculator. Okay, here, 0 plus 1/3 divided by 2 is 1/6, or pi over 6. And again, you've got your choices. We can just keep adding a sixth all the way through. 3 over 6 reduces, though, this time to 1/2, or pi over 2. And then 4 over 6 is where the 2/3 is coming from. Otherwise, 1/3 plus 2/3, and then divide it by 2, and you could also get the half that way. Cosine, a value of 1, starting at the maximum, because again, we're looking for that U shape. Maximum 0, minimum 0, maximum. And we're trying to get a U. We're trying to avoid doing V. This isn't an absolute value function. So go curvy. And that should make us feel pretty good on that one. So there's not going to be a whole lot going on these. Okay, sometimes it may change an amplitude, sometimes a period, sometimes both. But just kind of take your time with that. Okay, bless you. Any questions on the front? Because we got one more graph to play with. All right, so as we head to the back, ooh, the ever fun fraction. Okay, amplitude is 2. Get my 2 and my negative 2 down. My B value is 1/2. Again, we've chatted, we've had this happen before. Dividing by 1/2 is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal, multiplying by 2. Which would be 4 pi. If you're not comfortable playing the mental math on that, not a big deal. 2 divided by 1/2 is 4. I could get it that way as well. Okay, but I've got to remember parentheses if I'm going to do it that way. I don't even think we're going to need the calculator anymore for this one. What's in the middle of 0 and 4? 2. What's the middle of 0 and 2? 1. And between 2 and 4? 3. So I get those guys in there. Sine starts at 0. And then to figure out up or down, again, just look at your A value. Just look at the number in front. Positive 2. First number I go to after 0 is positive 2. Back to 0, down to my min, back to 0. And we're good. So that is the graphing. That basically covers, what we've been up to here for the last several days, and not a lot of surprises that could come your way on the quiz as far as that goes. So then we do something else we've dealt with quite a bit. How many cycles does each sine function have in the interval from 0 to 2 pi? Find the amplitude and period. Okay, the only part we care about, just in case it ever extends past, is between 0 and 2 pi. Squeeze this other one in here. So, when I'm trying to figure out the cycle, how many complete patterns does it do? So I look to see where we start. And I'm going to follow. I don't end here. I know you're like, but that's back at 0. But remember, with sine, we go down and back up. So there's one cycle. We go down and back up. There's 2 cycles. We go down and back up. Okay? So my B is going to be 3. My number of cycles is going to be 3. Find the amplitude. Just go look to see where your maximum value's at. So it looks like that's at 2. And then your period. So just like the same stuff we were doing on the graphing, because it's always 2 pi divided by however many cycles there were, whatever my B is. If I could simplify it, I would, but in this case I can't, so that's all I can do. And that's all I'm going to do on the next one as well, except there's a lot more cycles it looks like. Mr. Harty doing a lot of scribbling. So I look, I'm like, okay, sine. So here's my start. Okay, there's 1. There's 2. And 3. 4. 5. And 6. So there's 6 cycles. Then everything else is just kind of my counting. So 1, 2. My maximum looks like it's at 3. And my period again is just 2 pi over b. But always look to see if you can reduce the part that doesn't have pi with it. Because if you can, you need to. And you could just have pi over 3 as well. You don't have to have the 1, but it doesn't hurt if you do. Issues. As we move forward, now we're trying to get the equation for these. And so like we've said before, okay, that's the format I'm looking to get this into. The amplitude's the easy part. That's just going to be given to me, so that makes me happy. If I'm given the number of cycles, that literally is your b value. You just plug it in and you're done. Can't hope for anything easier. However, if as you start bobbing along here, you get to this part. Period is not b, at least not yet. It can help us get there, though. These are the ones where I have to do my mini proportion, my 2 pi over b, and do my little equation here on the side, where I cross multiply to solve it. Only if it's the period, though. So if I cross multiply, and then we're solving for b. Do not divide both sides by 2 pi. That is not what's with b. 8 pi is what is with b. And the other danger here is sometimes our minds can play tricks on us. Sometimes your brain, you'll look at that and you'll think it says 8 divided by 2 and you'll write 4, but it isn't. It's 2 divided by 8, and when the bigger number is in the denominator, you're going to get a fraction. So 1/4 is my b, and that's the number that goes in the equation. Little details, those little points that are so crucial at this time of the year, got to remember to get all of them. Okay, got to be cautious with that. And that basically kind of covers some of our sine stuff. Okay, you're like, okay, this isn't terrible. And then to be perfectly honest, the only difference for 9 and 10 is that now we're plugging cosine in instead. The idea is still the same. I still put my amplitude in the front. I put cosine. If it says cycles, plug it in, easy point. If it doesn't say cycles, though, again, we're back to the proportion. So I'm back to doing 2 pi over b. And some of you may notice the pattern here. You're like, hey, those are both 2 pi, so these both have to be 3. Now, if you recognize that right away, cool, go ahead and be done. But if you don't, not the end of the world. Still can cross multiply. Still can solve for b by dividing by 2 pi. And 6 divided by 2. I get 3 that way too. So you usually will have at least one backup plan that you can do with these to make this a little bit easier. So one more part with this newer stuff that we've had. Okay, a little error analysis here. A student looked at the graph below and stated the amplitude was -2. Okay, what's the first problem before I even read anymore? You can't have you can't have a negative amplitude. So, big error there. I'm even going to write that down right away. Can't have negative amplitude. That is so true. So, what did the student incorrectly think? We got that part. And the period was 4 pi. Now, if you look at this, you can kind of see, okay, that's 2 pi, that's negative 2 pi, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 pi in the middle. Okay, I suppose. But that's not the case. So, what actually is the amplitude? Positive 2. Now, the period, we're going to have to do a little bit of thinking here. If we look between 0 and 2 pi, I need to know how many cycles occurred in there, because that's going to help me finish this off and find the period. So I'm like, okay, there's 1, there's 2. So there were 2 cycles in there. So my actual period is 2 pi over b. 2 pi over 2, which is pi. Okay? As long as you find the correct values and some type of thing that the student made an error with and can explain it a little, that was perfect. That one's a good one to go with. Okay? But at the very least, make sure you calculate the correct ones. And no, the correct ones will not be up here, because that'd be kind of silly. The rest of this is all taking a quick step back at our first quiz and kind of also getting us thinking again about some of those when we have the unit test next week. So, quiz 1 review. Turn each measure from radians to degrees or degrees to radians. Oh boy. So if I'm in radians and I want to get rid of radians, do I multiply by pi over 180 or 180 over pi? 180 over pi, because that's the only way to make the pi's cancel out. So then I can just go to my calculator. 2 times 180 is 360, divided by 3. No more radians, I'm in degrees. Happy, happy. And if any of you ever get confused, I'd always do the radian one first. So maybe I switch the order on the quiz or something. Because then you know, well, if this was 180 over pi, this one's got to be the opposite. And if I need some help on the reduction, because there is a reduction here, I don't want to leave it that way. We end up with 4 over 3. Don't lose your pi. 4 pi over 3. Not bad. Not bad at all. So as we get down the home stretch here, all right, solve for the variable in each triangle using SOHCAHTOA. So yes, that will be there still. Okay, the angle you're using is marked. So reminder, when I'm labeling my sides, biggest side across from the right angle is my hypotenuse. If I start at the angle given and work my way over to the opposite side, that's my opposite, and adjacent is the one that's connected to the angle. So to figure out what trig function to use, which sides do I have for the variable and for the other side? Well, I have adjacent and I have hypotenuse, which is cosine. So the cosine of 60 is adjacent over hypotenuse. And this is where we can chat again about, okay, so now how do I get the actual answer? Well, there's 2 options. Either, if you remember our little pattern from before, if the variable's on top, these 2 guys get multiplied together. Okay, that's going to be one option. So let's see. So H would be 500. Or, if you need to do it algebraically, Because sometimes, hey, some of us like patterns and stuff, and some of us not quite so much, and that's okay. My other option would be, if I had it set up, I think about it like I do with algebra. Well, I'm dividing h by 1,000. So I got to multiply both sides by 1,000. H equals 1,000 times cosine of 60. And I get the same answer. So multiple options, multiple options, multiple options. And 15 and 16 is going to be the same way we're working here. Hypotenuse, opposite, and there's my adjacent. I look to the side for the variable that I'm solving for and for the other value. So I have opposite and hypotenuse. So I'm going to use sine. So sine of 39 is opposite over hypotenuse. And I notice the pattern is the same as it was in 14. The variable term is on top. So I'm going to be multiplying the value in my trig function. And typically with these, we round to the nearest tenth. Degrees are normally to the nearest whole, other ones are to the nearest tenth. But this isn't one of those that if you wrote 19, I'm going to jump up and down the screen because I'm going to assume you round to the nearest whole. There's no biggie there. So then my last one, like, all right, hypotenuse, opposite, adjacent's all that's left. I notice I have opposite and adjacent as my numbers. Opposite and adjacent would be tangent. But be careful, I'm looking for an angle. Opposite over adjacent. So how do I get the little -1 dealio there? Okay, second. So second, that'll get me an angle measure. And then just type in the fraction. And again, normally here, we'll go to the nearest whole degree. If you wrote 36.9, wouldn't get marked wrong. And then the last two problems are going to go right along with that, except now we got to draw the picture. So we get to see Harty's artistry at work. A damsel is in distress and is being held captive in a tower. Her knight in shining armor is on the ground below with a ladder. Okay, let's see here. All right, here's our knight. Yep. Okay, here's our ladder. When the knight stands 15 feet from the base of the tower, there's our tower, and looks up at his precious damsel, the angle of elevation to her window is 60 degrees. Reminder, I don't care if it says angle of elevation, angle of depression, doesn't matter. The angle goes here. Okay, always stays in that bottom corner. How long does the ladder have to be? Careful. Not how high is it up the tower, no. How long does the ladder have to be? So I have to think these things out a little bit. Now it's just like 14 through 16 work. I label my sides. Stop for a moment to say, okay, what have I got? I've got A and H. I've got adjacent and hypotenuse, which is cosine if I look up at the top. Adjacent over hypotenuse. Be careful. Notice where the variable is now. It's not on top anymore. Now it's on the bottom. So again, two ways I can tackle it. If I remember the pattern is we're going to divide by the trig function if x is on the bottom. I will show you how to do it if you don't remember that here momentarily. 15 divided by the cosine of 60 is going to get me 30. So the ladder would have to be 30 feet long. But if I do not remember that, again, no worries. If I have that same thing and I need to use algebra instead. Okay, first thing, I got to get rid of whatever this fraction is. So whatever's in the denominator, we multiply by x in this case. The unfortunate thing on this one is x isn't by itself yet when I go that route. To get x by itself, I've got to divide by the cosine of 60. And that's where this is coming from. Okay? So either way gets me there. I just got to work at it a bit. But setting up my sides, reading carefully, and then just thinking through the algebra, always a good thing. And finally, a 12-meter flagpole. Okay, let me get my triangle here, my right triangle. A flagpole normally would be vertical in nature, at least we hope. Casts a 9-meter shadow. Reminder, shadows are on the ground, not floating in the air somewhere. So that's going to be on the bottom. Find the angle of elevation of the sun. All right. So again, get my sides labeled. I've got opposite and adjacent. I look up at the top. O and A go with T for tangent. Opposite over adjacent. Remember with my angle that I'm going to need a second, so second tan. 12 over 9. And again, we're at about 53 degrees. Tomorrow's quiz. 18 questions. Okay, setup is the same. You have basically the quiz in your hand. If you need an extra copy to play with later, cool, grab one. This video, successful, will be up in a little bit, so that's there for you as well. But otherwise, just work this through. Make sure your homework's done, so the retake's an option if you want it.